Welcome to what I assume is going to be a multi-part series on building a very crappy cooking game using Photon Fusion. To begin with, we're going to start, as always, by creating a new Unity project. We can do 3D or 3D URP, the Universal Render Pipeline. If we do the Universal Render Pipeline, just know that we're going to have some broken textures. I think for this particular project, it doesn't matter too much to have the universal stuff, so I'm going to go ahead and go with 3D. And I'm going to name this project, let's see, Cooking Networked Game. Now this is going to take a little while for this to spin up this project, so while that happens, I'm actually going to go ahead and open up a web browser as well. And I'm going to go download Photon Fusion, just in case I haven't. So we'll go find that. It doesn't take us to the downloads. We actually want to go to the SDKs page, and then we will scroll down until we find the Fusion download. Click the Get Fusion SDK. It won't let us click this button to download it unless we're signed in, so we may need to go click sign in, and I will have to remember what my username and password is because I forget every single time. I also forget to click this I'm not a robot button every single time. It's really easy to miss. Those are the two I thought it might be. Or it might not be with this email. I'm beginning to suspect that's actually the case. Which is all great because we're still waiting for Unity to launch. So there we go. So once you've logged in, you can click this download button. We're going to need that download in a second. I actually have this download on my computer like 12 different times already. So not like I specifically need to download it a third time, but when it does download, it's going to download this Unity package, which will appear somewhere in your beautiful Android or your downloads folder. So we got all that done, even with the relaunching, and we're still waiting for Unity to launch. So I'm going to go ahead and pause this video until it launches. Wonderful. So Unity's set up our project for us. It's a basic 3D project. There's nothing really much in there. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get Photon Fusion into our projects. We're going to either go to assets import, or we can just drag and drop this Unity package into the project, and it's going to do our imports here. And there it goes. The importation is occurring. And while it's happening, actually, I had forgotten that we're going to need our key for Fusion. So if we're signed in here, which I should be, I don't know why it says I'm not, we can go click Dashboard on the Photon Engine site and either set up a new Fusion application by going to Create New App and selecting Fusion as your app in this case and all that stuff. I already have done this a couple times, so I have a couple apps. I'm going to select just this one called Same App. I'm going to copy that app ID. And once this loads, we're going to pause again. So once Fusion has installed into Unity, you're going to be presented with this view like we've seen before, and we need to plug in our app ID. I somehow have some E's inside of there, which I do not want. Why do I have all those E's? Let's go copy that app ID again from the Fusion website. No, those E's look like they might be correct. Let's try this one, see if it's happier with this one. Oh, and we had to hit enter. Then we hit enter. You get the green check mark, you're good to go. And we can close that. Awesome. So here is this. We've got all these things in here. I'm going to make a, well, we've got a scenes folder in here with a sample scene. That's the scene that I have open. I'm going to go select this scene and rename it to game scene. And this is going to be the main scene that we're going to work on in this game. You'll have to reload it for it to work correctly. And we're going to set it up to be sort of a top-down, control your character style game. And we're going to do it with Fusion's basic stuff that it gives to you, which is fine for us to begin with. And it's going to be a little bit of a pain to us for us to customize later on, because there's more code than I would typically give to a beginner. For that, I apologize, but I think it's nice for us to get up and running relatively quickly. It's also the way that my cheater project is set up, so we're going to do that. So with this game scene open that we have, we're going to go to Fusion. We're going to go to game object, and we're going to go to setup basic fusion scene, the second one here. And this is going to import a lot. So you're going to see over here in the hierarchy, we're going to get more than just the main camera and the directional light. So fusion, game object, setup basic fusion scene. And that's going to give us our basic fusion scene. This looks different than what I had before, but maybe that's a good thing. And when we click run now, it's going to compute for a second. We can click start host. We're going to be starting up. And once we start up, we connect and we have our character here in the game. And our character can move around and exist as they wish to be. So we're going to use this character as the baseline character for our game. They come with a bunch of sort of stuff that we're going to have to deal with for our programming, but that's fine. And then we're going to customize some things on top of this character controller to get us up and running relatively quickly. So major things that we need for a cooking gang, if we were to think about this, might be we need customers, right? With needs. We have food to spawn, food cooking capability, delivery capability, and we need the ability to, actually I think that's all of it. Those are sort of like the major ones there. We can spawn food, we can cook it, we can deliver it to customers with needs. That kind of gets us through everything that we have there. So let's work on these first couple here, like the food cooking capability and maybe the food to spawn capabilities. If we want to do some food and to cook some food, it would certainly help to have some assets that represent that food. And so we're going to turn to our hero, Mr. Kenny, and his game assets, because they're easy to sort of find a collection of assets that all sort of look the same-ish and represent what we need. So I'm going to go to kenny.nl/assets. I'm going to go to 3D. And actually, I'm going to see if I can find, there's the food kit, which was one that I used. And I think there's also a kitchen kit. I want to check real fast if the kitchen has everything I need, if we're going to need to download two at the same time. Yeah, because there's the steak. I'm going to go ahead and download the food kit. And then I'm going to go back to assets here. And while that food kit is downloading, I'm going to go to 3D. And there's a second kit that I used as well, which I believe is on one of the earlier pages. Castle, weapon, fantasy, graveyard. Maybe. I know there's one that's just like furniture. I have no clue where it went, though. I'm missing it clearly. There's space, that's exciting. Animated graveyard castle. Oh, there's furniture. Beautiful. And we're also going to go download his furniture kit as well. So we're going to download the food kit and the furniture kit, both of those. So let me go to my downloads again, show in folder. And we're going to take a small selection from each of them. So we're not going to use all the models. So I'm going to go ahead and extract food kit. And furniture kit is also downloaded, so I'm going to go ahead and extract that as well. I'm using 7-zip, but you can use your built-in operating system as well. And back in Unity, I'm going to, in my root assets folder, make a new folder called models. Ka-chunk. And into models, I am going to drop a couple of models. Let's go open up furniture. We're going to go open up side. Our models, we're going to open up FBX as sort of our one of the ones that plays pretty nicely with us for Unity, though. It can read all of these. And we're going to find, we've got some kitchen stuff. I'm really looking for like maybe a fridge could be useful. I'll drop a fridge in there. And I want a stove. And just in case, maybe I'll drop a stove electric in there as well. That's, I think, all I want for here. Maybe I'll grab a quick, like, is there a counter maybe? I don't really see a counter. I see a cabinet, but I don't think that's what I want. How about kitchen bar? I'll drop a kitchen bar in there as well. Okay, so we've got a kitchen bar, we've got a kitchen frizz, we've got a kitchen stove, and we've got a kitchen stove electric, just in case I want to use that one instead. That came from our furniture kit. We're going to go back. We're going to go find the food kit. We're going to open up models. We're going to go into FBX. And this one doesn't matter quite so much. The ones that I do recall using, that I believe I'm going to use for this one, are corn dog. So it's very Indiana state fair sort of thing. And then I believe I did a steak. I don't know if I want to do steak this time, though. What else do we have here? Ooh, how about pizza? We'll do a pizza. And there's got to be like we'll do a sandwich. Those three are good. So we're going to drop in corn dog, pizza, and sandwich. And those are going to be our 3D models. You'll note that they come in a little bit large in our thing. And I think in this case, I'm going to scale them down rather than scale them up, which is what I tried to do in the last one. And it didn't work very well. So we've got 6 models in total here. Wait, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 models in total. We'll be using at least 5 of them. All right. Now, as I mentioned, like one of the things that we're going to need to be able to do in this case is to spawn a food item, to grab a food item from somewhere. So let's make an asset that allows us to spawn that food item. I'm going to go up to game object. I'm going to make an empty game object. And I'm going to make sure it's positioned at 0, 0, 0. Is this what is this? It's just a... I don't know what's up with that floor. It's interesting. So there's our game object. It's at 0, 0, 0. And then once it's at 0, 0, 0, I'm going to pull it up a little bit maybe, and then I'm going to pull it over to the right. So it's still completely empty, but it's now sort of like to the right. And we're going to rename this, I think I called this food container. So we're going to call this food container. And here is where I think what I'm actually going to do for this one is, and rather than the cube, I'm going to use that fridge. So I'm going to drag a fridge on top of that food container. I'm going to make sure it's a child of food container by sort of making sure that when I hit the arrow next to it, that it appears and disappears. And now that I have this set up here, I'm going to go ahead and sort of just get the fridge in a good place. So it's pretty big here, which is great, but I'm going to scale it down so it makes sense inside of our world. And maybe get it to something that feels like it's a little bit closer to the center of my food container parent object. Great. Awesome. And so now we have a fridge that represents our food container. I love that there's a back on this. That's absolutely wonderful. I'm going to put one over here. Or we're going to have that food container over there. With the root food container object selected, I'm going to then go over to its inspector, and I'm going to add a component, and I'm going to add a box collider. I believe in the end, we're actually going to have multiple box colliders on this sucker, but let me go open up the game to inspect these containers. I have the ability to walk through them. I actually don't care too much about that right now, so we'll do it that way. So I'm going to add a box collider. You know, this box collider is like way down to the right, so I'm going to have to click the edit box collider button here and make that take up the space of the fridge. And in fact, I might, because this is going to be an interaction point for my character, might make it a little bit more forgiving than that even. That seems pretty decent to me. So there's my food container. It has that, and so the next thing we're going to do now is set this, we're going to set that food container to be a trigger. So we're going to check that is trigger button for the box slider. And now we're going to set it up so that this thing is networked and so that a character can go interact with it. And this is going to take us a while to get to the actual final interaction because we're going to have to start gunking around in the character itself. So food container. Because I want it to be networked, I'm going to have to now add a network object component to it. And once I save, it's going to bake that for us. So we're good. So make sure always be saving your level. I get bit by this all the time. And then we're going to start customizing our player. So I'm going to go right click inside of assets and create 2 new folders. One folder is going to be called scripts. The other folder is going to be called prefabs. So we're going to have both of these pretty soon. In fact, this kitchen container will soon be a prefab as well. And I'm trying to figure out the best way to approach this. So we're going to want to make a player for this. So let's go find that prefab that already exists for Fusion. Like I said, we're going to sort of like go in and steal a little bit of what Fusion's given to us. So we're going to go into the Photon folder here. We're going to go into Fusion. We're going to go into, I want to say it's resources. No. Where is this? It can't be that far. Fusion, plugins, no. Resources, no. Scripts. There we go. Assets, Photon, Fusion, scripts, prototyping. Do they have the prefabs in here? Yes, prototyping, prefabs. And we're going to go find, this is our player prototype, that guy that we saw earlier on. We're going to duplicate it. So we're going to right click on that. We're going to go to, well, let me duplicate from a right click. Maybe not. No. Okay, so, well, with it selected, we are going to, come on, Visual Studio. With it selected, we're going to hit the Control D button, or we can hit the Control C and then Control V button to copy it. And it's going to make a player prototype 1 prefab asset. We are going to drag that asset all the way onto our root assets folder here. So it's going to be move out of the Fusion prototypes and it's going to be here at the very root. So what is it mad about? I don't know what it's mad about. There we go. So there's that. We're going to drag that guy actually into the prefabs folder here. So here is our clone of that player prefab. I'm going to click on it and I'm going to change it into cooking player for the name. So I'm going to right click to rename and change it to cooking player. Awesome. And if we go back to this game here and we go to the prototype network start, not that one, the prototype runner, and we look at the player spawner prototype, right now it's set to spawn that player prototype that is in the prototyping folder for Fusion. Just gives you those things to play with. We don't want that one though. We don't really want to touch the one that they gave us just because it can get a little confusing because it's clearly not our own code there. So on the prototype runner for that player prefab, we are going to drag in that new cooking player prefab that we have there. So we should see this as a cooking player network object there. And let's go give it a quick run right now. And then say start host just to see sort of what this game looks like when it begins. Oh, this is actually a good point. This is a good thing for us to learn as well. So I copy this. It says cooking player prefab has not been added to the object table. And there are a few times when this happens. There's a way to rebuild your object table. So if you get this error ever, you go to Fusion and you go to rebuild prefab table. And that will rebuild that object table for you. So it will work for you now. It's wonderful. It's like magic. If only all programming was like magic, but most of it's like dark magic. So there's our player prefab. Nothing significantly different about it yet. Awesome. And also my camera is, this whole thing is in a different spot than I expected it to be. So I'm going to grab my food container because I really want it to be on the left. And I'm going to then rotate it. Make sure you're rotating the container object, not the child object. Second thing I'm going to do actually is I'm going to grab my camera, and I want this to be more of a top-down kind of view. So I'm going to pull that camera up a bit on the Y, and I'm going to rotate it so it's looking down. So I have sort of a top-down view on this. If you want to go like kind of funny, you can also do a projection orthographic, and you get kind of like a really wonky projection, but I'm going to stay in perspective there. So that's going to be our view into the game. It looks a little bit different now. And so if we run, you'll see a top-down with our player prefab. I think this makes things like the fridges read a whole heck of a lot nicer. The whole game sort of reads a whole heck of a lot nicer. I don't know how you would reach the upper level of that fridge. I probably need to scale it down a bit, but this still kind of functions. Great. So our next goal is to actually begin to be able to interact with this. And the way that I have this programmed is I have a point on our character that I consider the point that you use to interact with things. And then I use that point to sort of, when buttons are down, to check, are we interacting with something or not? So let's go ahead and add that point to our prefab. So inside of our prefab, I'm going to come in here. I'm going to right click on cooking player and create empty. I'll call this interact point. And then I'll hit W so I can move this in front and have it fairly decently in front of your character. Something like that would be absolutely golden for this particular character. Yep, so there's the interact point. And now we are going to create a script for this character that allows us to interact. So we're going to hop back into scripts here, and I'm going to actually go off. I don't know if I want to go off the record here, actually. I don't think I will. Yeah, okay, I'm not going to go off the record. So we're going to create a script for this character, but the way we're going to create a script for this character is if we go to prefabs and find our prefab, we have something on here right now called network character controller prototype script. I'm going to go find that script. So where is the script actually? I'm going to go look for that script. So network character. There it is. And this should have the word prototype in it. Yep. So I'm going to go find that script, and I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate it. So I hit D, and now I have that second one there. I think if yeah, so I've duplicated it. This duplicated version, you know it will be duplicated because it has a 1 there. I'm going to drag that one all the way back up to my root assets folder. And I'm going to drag that into scripts. And I'm going to rename this to cooking character controller. Awesome. So I've renamed the script. Because I've renamed it, I'm going to have to rename it inside of my code as well. So I'm in a cooking character controller.cs. That means that this has to be called cooking character controller, spelled the same and everything like that. So we save and we come back. And we run this code. We actually shouldn't see much of a difference quite yet. So we'll spawn in, we can move around. Oh, I forgot you can jump with this character. Jump actually feels really good now that I haven't played with the size. So there's nothing different. But I'm now going to add the capability to interact with things inside of my cooking character controller. And this is where, please forgive me, but like, I need my cheater stuff up to be able to do this correct. So Let me find the cheater script as well. Oh, that's not the controller, that's the customizer. No, that's right. There we go. Awesome. So as I mentioned, we made the interact point a couple of minutes ago, that point that's hovering in front of the rest of the objects there. We're going to write the code now that when someone clicks on a button, they interact. They'll be able to interact with other things based on a custom script we put onto those objects. Now, there's a bunch of code that's already in the script, right? This is all the stuff that moves your character around. It's a slightly more advanced version of like a simple move that I would write for you all. That's like get a vector and move in a direction, but it does its job, and I don't feel like rewriting all that code for things where I'm trying to talk about something else in this case. So we need to know about the interact point so we can tell the interact point to do its thing. Because we need to know about it, that means we're going to need to have a variable for it. So public transform interact point, and then beneath there, public float interact radius. Let's just do these other two while we're here. So we're gonna do two more properties. We're also gonna do a public game object, carried object, which equals null. And we're going to do a public transform carry point. If I could spell publicly right. You can see that carry point and interact point are both transforms, and they have some sort of point in there. They're going to be really similar in how we use them. Finally, we code how big of a radius in which we can interact, so we can be like really specific or really sort of forgiving. I find that 0.5 works really well for that. So we're going to do an interact radius equals 0.5 at the very start. Once we've done that, we're going to hop down to where is this interact? Oh, interesting. Let's save that and we'll come back and let that build for a second while I figure out where the script is. Did I say that this was going to be rough at the very start? Like, it's going to be slightly rough as I rebuild some of these things that I built months ago. Okay. I think we actually can cheat this one just a little bit. We'll see. Okay. Cool. So if we come back here and we go look at our prefabs, our cooking player, we had this public transform interact point and interact radius. And we want to go ahead and remove this network character controller script from it because we're going to use the script version that we made instead. So scripts cooking character controller, we're going to add that to the root, make sure it's onto our root object here. The interpolation target can just be set to the graphic. But the thing to note here is that we have these 4 new properties that weren't in the network character controller: the interact point, the interact radius, the carried object, and the carry point. We have this object over here called interact point already up in the hierarchy. So if we select carried point, we can just drag interact point down to this interact point here to specify, goodness, undo, interact point, drag from there to specify this is the point from which my character is going to interact. And then we're going to hop back into our code here, and I think that I can cheat this one in there. We're going to look for, I assume, oh, maybe there is no fixed network update. This isn't, oh, it's a network transform, not a network object. Interesting. Okay, so we're going to write a bit of code to customize how our character works. So we're going to go back to assets. We're going to go to scripts, and we're going to make a new script and call it, I believe, cooking input. Yep, cooking input. So create C# script, cooking input. I'm going to wait for that to load and get rolling. Cooking input, capital C, capital I, no spaces in between them. Once that thing has compiled for the first time, we can open up cookinginput.cs and we can write using Fusion, because this is going to be some network code. And we can change this public class from a mono behavior to a network behavior. Awesome, with that U. Now in this case, we only want to do the action on the frame that the button was pressed down, which means we need to have some memory of the previous button state. So we're going to make a networked variable called called buttons previous. So networked means that this is going to be synchronized across all of them, and then public network buttons space buttons previous. And that's going to have a getter and setter that is sort of specified by Fusion itself. Now we're not going to use start or update. We're going to use another method that the Fusion gives us called fixed network update. So public override fixed network update, or fixed update network. It's the same concept. And inside of here, we are going to get the update from the user if it's our player, right? So this is some Fusion magic. So if get input, network input prototype. And you can see this has that word prototype in here, and we haven't written this one. This is one of those classes that that Fusion has given for us in their prototyping folders that lets you get up and running relatively quickly, but if you want to customize them, take some time to work correctly. I have this done incorrectly, so it's out var input double equals false and then return. So this is going to create a var input that has all the buttons, and if it doesn't, it's just going to exit. So if it fails to get input, it moves on. And the only time it fails to get input is if this is a character that the current user should not be controlling. So we're going to compute the press release date. So compute. So it's going to get the buttons that we have pressed. And then the released ones will be in this object here. Buttons previous again. So those are our previous buttons. And so now we're going to store those buttons. Equals input.buttons if so again, I'm using a whole bunch of the built-in Photon Fusion networking stuff. So network input prototype is something that Fusion has developed for us that you can create your own version if you want to, which we will do in other videos, or we have done in other videos, or I have other videos you can reference for how you can do that. But I don't feel like writing all that right now, so we're just going to use the prototypes they give to us because it's good enough. And then I'm going to send a message to ourselves to say interact, which is going to call a method on this object. So we're going to go ahead and hop back into Unity now and let this compile. Hope it compiles. Wish fervently that it compiles. And no errors. So we're going to attach that script that we just wrote, that cooking input, to the cooking player root. Awesome. And now that we've attached that to the cooking player root, we're actually going to return to our scripts. And we're going to go to the cooking character controller. And I'm going to scroll down to the very bottom and put my caret right in between those two closing curly brackets, because I'm going to put in a new method into this object. It will be called interact. So public void interact. No, just interact. I don't know why it filled in all that other stuff. So public void interact. We're going to do a raycast. Actually, it's not a raycast, but do physics check or overlap. Overlap sphere, which is just like an easy call to do. And we're going to overlap based on those two things that we set here at the very top, right? That interact point, which is that point that I had in front of our character. That is where you can interact. And then the interact radius, which is how big of a radius you can interact with. Overlap sphere. So that's our interact point. Dot position, comma, interact radius, which is how big of an overlap we're doing. And this is going to essentially just, let me do a two-dimensional version. And let's say that this is our point. It's going to draw a sphere around there. And if there's other objects, say like a box or a cylinder that are overlapping that, it's going to return that in this list that we can then do things with. So that list is called hit colliders. So for each var hit collider in hit colliders, hit collider dot send message do interact, comma, this dot game object, comma, send message options dot don't require receiver. So if we're hitting, if it's overlapping with something, just go to its game object, send it a message and say, hey, you should call this function on any script that's attached to you. Tell it that I told you to do that. And then if it doesn't respond or it doesn't really care, don't worry about it. It doesn't really matter. So we're going to go ahead and save that. We'll come back here, we'll save, and we'll let that chug for a second. We're going to make sure that we have no errors, and we'll address those errors if we have to. And now we're going to go make a third script. So we can finally finish that whole cycle. And I'm going to trip myself up here, I know, but I'm going to name the script differently than I have named in my demo project. So we're going to go create C# script in the scripts folder. I'm going to make a C# script. We're going to call this, maybe we'll still call it bin. I'm going to call it bin with a capital B. So bin. Bin. Great. Now we're going to go ahead and open up bin. And bin is also going to be a network object. So the first thing we're going to do is right beneath, we're going to say using Fusion. And then inside of mono behavior, we're going to change that into a network behavior. We don't do a start, nor do we do an update with this one, but we do actually have 3 properties that we will wind up using in here. So let's get those in while we're working on the very top here. So we're going to do 3 publics, a public game object, which is our ingredient prefab. Because you should be imagining this bin not like a trash bin, but rather like a bin of food, or in this case, it would be like the fridge. We're going to make a public string ingredient type, which we're going to set to be pizza, because it's not actually ingredients, but whatever. And then a public game object model to spawn. So those will be our 3 things. I suspect one of them is actually a lie, but lowercase o for 2. Now, the next thing we're going to put in here is the only method that exists in this class. We're going to put in a public void do interact. Oh, we've seen that before, haven't we? Game object initiator. And before I do anything else, I'm just going to do a print and put the words "it works" down inside the console here. So let's come back and let Unity compile that. Awesome, so no errors, that compiled. And then we're going to go back to our fridge here, and we're going to select that root food container that doesn't have any script attached to it, and we're going to drop the bin script onto it as well. So it has these 3 things, the box glider, the network object, the bin, and now I believe we can test. So let's go test real fast. So I'm going to start, we're going to click start host. We'll move our, why is my character moving funky now? Interesting. We'll move our character over there. We'll debug that character in a second. We'll click the button I know that is the fire button is the left mouse button. So when we know we're sort of like visually over, we'll click that button and we should see the words "it works" pop up. And in fact, I've clicked my button 7 times, so I'm seeing it pop up 7 times. So I know that bin is working so far. So let's get the next bits of code into bin so we can start doing something interesting with it. Instead of the print "it works," we are going to spawn an object on top of it. So network object food item is equal to runner.spawn model to spawn, comma new vector 3, comma quaternion dot identity, which is just up. Like, don't rotate it. That's what quaternion dot identity means. And then the second piece of the puzzle here is going to be, we're going to say, hey, I made this object. Now, whoever interacted with me, go ahead and you get to have the object now. So initiator, just that game object, right from when we told to do interact, I said, I am the one interacting with you. Dot get component. Cooking character controller. This will actually be cooking network. Oh, it's going to be cooking character controller. So cooking character controller. Dot. And then open and close parentheses after that. So then dot pick up object. food item dot game object. Okay, so pickup object doesn't exist on there yet. We're going to do that in a second. So we say go ahead and make this object that we haven't made any objects to be made yet. We'll get there in a second. And then once we've made it, person who interact with me, go ahead and pick it up now. You can have this object, it's yours. So let's return to our cooking terror controller because it does not have a method called pickup object yet, but it will soon. Isn't that exciting? Awesome. So beneath interact, we're going to, again, put our carrots in between those two closing curly braces. We're going to hit enter a few times to make a new one. We're going to do a public space void space pickup object. And then we need to know what object to pick up. So game object, and I just call this OBJ for short. It just needs to be a name. All right, we need 3 steps to pick up the object. So OBJ dot transform dot set parent carry point. So that's going to move it so that our object will be carried at our carry point, which we haven't set yet. We'll do that in a second. OBJ that transform that position is equal to carry point that position. And then finally, carried object is equal to OBJ. So these are the second things that we set up at the very start here. So we have our carried object, which starts off as nothing, and now it's something. So we have this pointer that says that's what I'm carrying. And this is where I want to carry it, but we've yet to set that in our game. So let's save that and return here. Let that run, or let that compile. Once that compiles, we can go to our prefabs. We can open up our cooking player, and we can, let's actually double click to just go into the prefab view. We can make another point, which would be our carry point. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to create an empty here. We'll call this carry point. And I like to make it so that you kind of carry above their heads because it's kind of funny to me. So right there, right above the head. 3 dimensions, you're really messing with me today, huh? Beautiful. We'll go back to cooking player. There's that carry point that isn't set yet, and then we'll drag carry point onto there to customize the carry point. So now those things are all set. They're good to go. The last thing we need to do is we go to our food container. It doesn't know what model to spawn yet. It doesn't have something to spawn yet. So let's make it something to spawn. This is actually going to be another sort of template object. So we're going to start with an empty game object. So game object create empty. And I'm just going to call this, I'll actually name this one pizza. So this will be our pizza. And then inside of there, we will drag in our pizza prefab. So pizza prefab into pizza. Oh, it's just very far away. Let's get that up to 0, 0, 0. Pizza is surprisingly reasonably sized, and that's troubling to me. Okay. So there's our pizza prefab. Wonderful. The pizza is actually, in this case, also going to be a network object. Don't quote me on that. Let me double check real fast here. Prefabs. Yes. So the pizza is also going to be a network object. So I'm going to add a component. I'm going to make this add a network object to it. At the very root here. Do I need a box collider for this? I don't think I do. I think we're actually good there. Cool. And the pizza is going to be moving around on the screen, so it actually also is going to need a network transform because we need it to follow around. Because it has a network transform, it needs something to interpolate, so I'm going to try to cheat with the model itself for now. We'll see how well that goes. And that will be good for now. Okay, so we're going to go to our prefabs folder, and pizza is going to be dragged into the prefabs folder as one of our prefabs. fact, we're going to delete the prefab from our scene, so it doesn't even exist in our scene. We're going to go to food container where it says, let me double check what our script is written as. Bin is instantiating the model to spawn. So where it says model to spawn, we're going to drag pizza onto there. So now that pizza from our prefabs has been dragged in there. And let's cross our fingers and hope this works. Oh, that's why. I know why it doesn't turn. Or at least I have a suspicion why it doesn't turn. So we're going to sort of just slide backwards and hit the interact button. And now we have a pizza above our heads. Look at that. It's beautiful. I want to check out this cooking person real fast. Now I don't know why it doesn't turn. That troubles me quite a bit. I will figure that out either during a pause or by the next stream. Cool. So now we have this pizza. We've got the ability to spawn the pizza, which means that my next sort of goal here is that I want multiple ingredients for this game. So we're going to go to prefabs. And this food container is not yet a prefab, but let's go ahead and make it a prefab. So I'm going to drag and drop food container into here because it works beautifully as a spawner. And then I'm going to duplicate pizza 2 times. So do I want to duplicate? No, not yet. We're just going to leave that there. So there's food container. Let's drag in 2 more food containers because we'll be doing more with these in the future. So there's 1 and there's 2, 1 for each of the foods that we will have. While we're here, let's begin working on a little bit more of low layout and one more piece of the puzzle here. So I'm going to go to game object, create empty. I'm going to name this one stove because this will eventually be our stove. Let's make sure it's at world center or somewhere that actually makes halfway decent sense. Great. I'm going to put the stove somewhere in the center here for now. And I'm going to go to models and maybe I'll do the stove. So I'm going to drag that stove on top of stove so it appears there. And I'm going to scale that sucker down until it makes more sense for our game. Even that's a little bit large. So make sure you're scaling down the model and not the container. So the container should still be 111 for its scale, but the model itself should be lower than 1. So there's my stove. I think that will be, it's going to be fine for now. The stove is actually going to work very similarly to the food container. So the next things we're going to do with that stove root element are to add a network object to it. And we're also going to add a box collider to it. We might actually do multiple box colliders here. So we might do 1 box collider on this one. Let me select the stove. Let me add a collider. Let me pull this out. And that's actually, that might be fine for the needs for this one. I think just for heck's sake, I'm going to go ahead and just click it as trigger as well. So that box collider is set as trigger. And then I'm going to make it so that the characters can show up over there. So I'm going to make an empty game object called bar. Into there, I'm going to drag in that kitchen bar as a child of bar. We'll go ahead and 0 bar's location now. So it's actually at world center to begin with. Double click on it to make it appear in screen. Click on the kitchen bar itself and then scale down to something that makes sense again. I don't know why it scales so weirdly. A little bit further. Great. And then selecting that root element, just move it around so it's somewhere over here. And I'm probably going to make maybe 2 of these. So there's 1, there's 2. Oh man, these need to be back. Great, and maybe I'd make a third one at some point, but I think that's fine. So now I have sort of a full little kitchen layout where I have to move from one place to another. Okay, so we've got things picking up, moving over. Let's do the full cycle or see how close we can get to getting those things onto the stove by the time we're done. So we're going to go to our scripts folder here, and we're going to make a new script that's going to 90% likely be called stove. Yep. So I'm going to right click inside of scripts. I'm going to go to create. I'm going to make a new C# script. We're going to call it stove. No R. There's no R in stove. Gosh, us. Awesome. And then we're going to double click on that script to open it up. Surprisingly, this is a network behavior, so we're going to be using Photon or using Fusion. And we're going to extend a network behavior rate. In our stove, does not have a start, nor does it have an update. But it does have a fixed network update among some other things. So it doesn't have a start and update. It has a couple of public properties. So the first one is going to be a networked object that is synchronized across all properties, and that is a Boolean. Network with a K. So this Boolean tells us if we do or do not have food. And then a link to the food object itself, and then a public transform. I'm going to call this food set point. Oh, how did I misspell transform? T-R-A-N. There we go. Transform. Awesome. Now, similar to how cooking character controller or how bin has a do interact, the same thing is going to happen for a stove. It's going to respond to the user facing it in the right direction and clicking interact. So we're going to write public space void space do interact game object initiator. And we can only put something on the stove if it doesn't have food before. So if it doesn't have food, if the stove doesn't have food, then we can do the rest of it. The first thing we're going to do is try to grab that object from the user and see if they actually have something or not. So game object carrying is equal to initiator dot get component, our cooking character controller dot carried object. Awesome. So we're going to go see in our cooking character controller, does it have a carried object? And that carried object gets set down here. So carried object equals obj when I do a pickup object, which happens from the bin. So it's that object that's coming that the bin spawned for us. If carrying, right? So if I got a true back from that, if it says there's something in there, or if that's not null, right? So food object is equal to carrying. So I'm copying that reference over now. I'm saying, cool, that is the object that the user is carrying. That's also the object that I want to be thinking about now. That's my food object. Food object.transform.parent, which is setting it so it will follow a different leader, is equal to this.transform. And then we're going to set has food equal to true for this. And in fact, I'm not going to do this.transform. I'm going to do the food spawn point. no, food set point, sorry. This dot food set point. So I'm going to say, hey, if it's got something, if that exists, it's not nothing, then remember it, then set it to be at the carrying position that I have, and I now have food, so like I can't accept other food. Great. Awesome. So now we need to come back to our stove here, and we actually need to set it where that set point is. So I'm going to right click on stove. I'm going to create empty. I'm going to call this food set point. And I do not believe we've attached the stove script on here. So I'm going to drag stove script onto here. So script to script. And it needs to know about that food set point. So I'm going to drag that from there onto there. So it knows about the food set point. All right, and we're going to see if we can get through the full gamut from picking up food from one area, although I don't have my rotation for some reason, and delivering it to another. You can see that it's now hovering there on that food set point. Though there's a bug or two that we need to fix there, but that's going to be for the next iteration. So we have pickup and we have delivery. Next week, or on the next video, what we're going to tackle is this thing actually cooking, picking it up and delivering it to a user, and the user being satisfied or not. Rotation for the character, and in fact, we're going to get a character controller in here as well, so, or an animator in there, so it's actually going to be an animated character. That'll be the goal for the next video, however.